Welcome back to Three Bold Takes, guys. We're continuing what makes a successful season, the series, and today we're on the Clemson Tigers. Now, this is one that I myself wanted to talk about because, Clemson, man, they've been a little rocky now for a couple years, and people are starting to have some questions about Dabo. So I want to start with you, Freddie, because I know you have some strong feelings about Mr. Sweeney. How do you feel about what Clemson needs to do in 2024 to have a successful year?
Yeah, I think it's no secret around here that I am not the biggest Dabo Sweeney fan in current states of college football. Now, you know, 2016, 2017, like those years, he was elite, right? And I think it's because of two glaring issues. One, the transfer portal and the NIL. They're the only team to not accept a single transfer player in the transfer portal. Had several transfer out, all right, but they didn't get any in, and you just can't do that. Now, I'm going to leave those aside because it's very apparent. I've spoken about it before. I don't think it's as relevant to this style video. But when you look at Clemson last year, they started off 4-4, right, with opening loss to Duke, 28-7, an absolute blowout of a game, embarrassment of a game for Clemson. Then you lose to Florida State at home in overtime, and then you got I still can't believe that I'm saying this, back-to-back losses after a bye week to Miami and NC State. NC State's a little okay. All right, I understand that. There's been a heck of battles between NC State and Clemson over the past few years, so that game normally is a good game. But Miami, they're Miami, and I think they're going to be better this year, but the past couple years have been bad. That game was in overtime too. But then, after that, you go on a string of wins, right? You beat Notre Dame at home. You beat Georgia Tech at home. You beat North Carolina at home. And then you go on the road and beat South Carolina. Now, at that point in the season, you make a bowl game, right? And then you play Kentucky in the Gator Bowl, and you win that game. And there was a lot of flack that was thrown around at how Dabo was excited, how the team was excited to win that game. They were saying that it was you shouldn't care, like you still had a sucky year overall, even though you won the Gator Bowl. And it's like, I disagree with that, right? You start 4-4, you rattle off what is that, 5 straight wins. So you that's how you build momentum going into 2024. Now, when you look at 2024 schedule, now keep in mind, even though they didn't take any transfer players, they still recruit at one of the higher levels in college football in the high school sense of recruiting. You have to add that asterisk in there. But when you look at their schedule, man, I see at max 3 losses to me. So I think a 10-2 season is very successful. I think 9-3 is probably more realistic here. Obviously, they open up with Georgia. What a tough opening game for a Clemson team that needs to prove in 2024 that they're still one of the upper echelon teams in college football, which they have not proven over the past couple of years. Obviously Florida State, Louisville, Virginia Tech. So I think it's a pretty favorable schedule for their sake. You do not get Notre Dame this year. And your non-con games, Quinn, you alluded to this, Appalachian State. This is before we were recording. So I'm gonna go 10-2 would be a very successful year for Clemson in 2024, but I would accept 9-3.
Yeah, for me, I think it's you got to be in that top 12. You got to be back in the playoffs. And honestly, a successful season is winning that first round game. Because Clemson, what we've gotten used to as fans is Clemson is an upper echelon elite team. And since the transfer portal and NIL came around, Dabo has withheld that team from being those standards now. And so, yeah, it was really awesome last year because we talked about him. I was on the boat of firing Dabo because of he's just not with the times now, and he rattled off 5 wins. That's great, but that's not Clemson great. That's Miami great. That is, past few seasons, Florida State great besides this last season. Like, that's not your brand. Your brand is to be a dominant ball team from the get go. And like Freddie said, you recruited at a high level. You do things very well. You have a great system in place. But since those things have happened, the transfer portal, the NIL, his assistants leaving, Dabo has faltered in being an elite head coach that we once thought he was. People were comparing him to Nick Saban at one point. We got to remember that. It wasn't just like, oh, this guy's really good. He's like Urban Meyer. No, they were saying next to the GOAT, the greatest guy to ever grace the sideline. So let's not get that twisted. And so now you're not playing at that level. You're struggling to get to 8 to 9 wins. I think you have to be in the top 12. And you have to win that first round playoff game to say, hey, Clemson's here. I think you need to be in the ACC championship and possibly win that. I know it's going to be a lot tougher. You still have Florida State on the links, NC State that'll probably be around hanging out. You don't have to play the juggernaut of North Carolina this season. Thank the Lord that you're Clemson. You don't have to do that, guys. My Tar Heels would probably whip them. But if none of that happens, I'm going to get very, very bold here, gentlemen. I think it's time to cut ties with Dabo Swinney. I think that ends your successful season. He has come out publicly several times in press conferences saying, like, the one that has itched me the most is nobody in the transfer portal was good enough for Clemson. Every other team in the country is taking a transfer portal guy. You're not, because they're not good enough for Clemson. There's not one guy that could take you from an 8 wins to 9 wins. That just doesn't sit right with me. Your coach, your head coach is coming out and saying that stuff, and he's not winning at an elite level like he once was. Hey, if he's winning 12 games, you know what? I agree with you, Dabo. But you're struggling to get to 8 or 9. You're not making the ACC championship anymore in a weak ACC. I don't know. And if this season doesn't go with an ACC appearance or ACC championship appearance, top 12 finish in the playoffs, I think it's time to look and say, hey, maybe we bring somebody in that's more in line with the transfer portal and NIL, because Dabo does not want to mess with either of them. And that, I know it's a crazy thing to say, but I think that's maybe something you look at the end of the season if it's not a successful one. Quinn?
Yeah, I want to start with this. I think there's the two like big games, and that's Georgia in a neutral site in Atlanta, and then that's the Florida State game. And then I think there's 4 trap games. Those trap games are North Carolina State, Louisville, Virginia Tech, and Appalachian State, which you can laugh about if you want, but the history of Appalachian State is terrifying. I would not shrug that off if I was any Power 5 school. They have a history of coming in and causing mayhem. So those 4 games are the ones that I circle as like those are potential trap games. The next part of this is, what is Clemson now? Is Clemson what Clemson has been historically for most of their time? Or is Clemson what Clemson was during the 14 playoff? That's the question. If you're asking me, if you're telling me, hey, Clemson, we need to judge success based on Clemson is what Clemson typically was, then for me, a successful season is going 8-4 or 9-3. You lose to Florida State, you lose to Georgia, and then you drop no more than 2 of those potential trap games. Honestly, I'd say 9-3 is a successful year. However, that's not the standard I'm going to judge it by yet. I'm going to give them one more season, and this is my crux season. And it goes on what you guys were talking about with this transfer portal stuff. I'm sorry. Like, I appreciate in some ways the want to still do it the old-fashioned way. But the reality is you're paid to win, and you're willingly putting yourself at a disadvantage. All right, so you got to prove to me this year that you can do it. And so for me, a successful year for Clemson, and to prove that they can do it, is you need to give me a win against either Georgia, Florida State, or if you happen to lose both of those games, you have to win the ACC championship game. You are not allowed to lose to any of the potential slip-up teams. And then you must be in the playoff, which you will be if you are in this scenario 11-2. you will be in the 14th or in the 12th playoff. All right. That's a successful season for Clemson this year, 11-2. Whether that means they're the ACC champion and they're the 1 through 4 seed, or they're coming in somewhere from 5 to 12 and they're going to have to play their way forward, I don't know. But that's a successful year for Clemson this year. If they fall short of that, it's time to start assessing what Clemson is now. I would say they've fallen firmly behind Florida State if they are unable to put themselves in the playoffs, because I am not worried about Florida State as a playoff team. That's the one team in the ACC I'm pretty sure of, to be honest with you. And then I think they'll eventually put themselves behind Miami, because Miami is recruiting at a high level and Miami is using the transfer portal and Miami is a transfer destination. And then let's be honest, let's go past 2024 for a minute. You're talking about expanding to either the SEC or the Big Ten. And if you're not using the transfer portal, let's look at the one there's more rumors of, and that's Clemson to the SEC. If you're not using the transfer portal, you can forget about it. You're behind Texas, you're behind LSU, you're behind Alabama, you're behind Georgia, you're behind Tennessee, Ole Miss, like Oklahoma. Like, the list is long of the teams that are going to be ahead of you. You're going to be a mid-tier program. So it's time to start like proving that you can do it this way, or move on. And so for me, successful season is 11-2 with a playoff appearance. You guys got anything to say to that?
I just love the whole "you're not allowed to do that" thing that you have going. I just love it when you do that.
Well, I mean, you're not. Like, let's be honest. If you are Clemson, the 4-team playoff era Clemson, you're not allowed to drop the game to Virginia Tech or Louisville or North Carolina State. You should beat all of those teams, and especially App State. You should beat all of those teams. You are better than them.
And what I want to add is, like, some people are going to sit here and they're going to get in our comments. They're going to say something. They're going to be like, well, the past 2 seasons, those aren't the championship level Clemson. No, but you've seen Dabo, his recruiting and everything at Clemson, and what they can do. It's not like they're a Washington and the best they're going to do is be able to get to the playoffs. We've seen them win national championships. We've seen them be dominant in those national championship games. And then to go and fall back down with the same coach, the same recruiting levels, fall back down to the ways that were before Dabo or right when Dabo got there, it's kind of like, it's not the standard. That's not fair, And if that's what we're going to do, you could probably bring in a younger coach that is more in line with what is going on in today's modern college football era, that is willing and able to go that same record, but also bring in transfer portal guys, also amend to the new ways of college football. And that's the thing here. You've seen Dabo Swinney. You've seen the peak of Dabo Swinney. And right now, it feels like a mudslide down a bad hill that Dabo Swinney can't get himself out of. And people are giving him a while to try and get out of it, when I personally don't think he will. I think the highest he can go now is 9-10 wins. So
it's just like you said. I mean, the peak of Dabo so far is 2015 to 2019. Lose the national title, win the national title, playoff appearance, win the national title, lose the national title. And since then, they've kind of, they had 2 more playoff appearances after that, or 1 more playoff appearance after that, but they kind of petered down.
Yep.
But I guess that's all we got on Clemson, guys. For those of y'all watching, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, keep following. We got a whole list of these videos going over a bunch of different teams and what we think will make for a successful season in 2024. That being said, I'm Quinn. I've been joined by Freddie, Chase. We're 3 Bold Takes, and we're signing out.